On this episode, I'm going to show you how to make the juiciest pork chops you've ever had. I'll share a secret to using a simple brine to get the most flavor, and a special method that involves baking them in the oven and searing them on the stove top. Most chefs will always choose bone in. So as we look at the pork chop, you can see the loin, but you can see a bit of the rib on the top. And the reason why is that this is going to help sort of stop the meat drying out, but also that excess fat is going to add a lot of flavor. So as it cooks, that fat's going to melt and it's going to add lots of flavor to it. However, this recipe will work with bone in or bone out. So we're going to focus on making a dry brine. And what a dry brine does, it's called reverse osmosis. And you're saying, well, what does that mean, John? The salt will go into the meat. Some of the juices will come up, but then they'll go back into the meat. And this will keep that lean, because pork chops are very lean, nice and juicy, which is what we want. And they're very easy to make at home. I'm just going to take some salt and I'm going to add some white sugar to it. I'm going to add some black pepper and I'm going to add some garlic powder, and we're just going to stir this together with a small whisk. And now we've got a basic dry brine. So now that we've got our ingredients mixed together, what we want to do is season these pork chops, and they're going to be generous. Whenever we season, we always want to season about 12 inches above the meat. That's the perfect height for spreading it out. If we're too close, we're going to end up clumping it together. So I'm just sprinkling, as you can see, the chop, both of them, from about 12 inches above. And that's a nice generous seasoning. I'm going to turn it on its side and season the sides of the meat as well. We've got a generous coating of the seasoning on there. What's going to happen now as it sits in the fridge, you want to let it go in there for 6 hours to overnight. Basically, what's going to happen is the salt is going to penetrate into the meat. It's going to release some of those juices. The juices will come out and then they'll go back in. When they go back in, the flavor of the peppercorn and the flavor of the garlic is going to go inside. And this is going to keep this nice and juicy. So I'm going to pop these in the fridge and let them sit for about 6 to 12 hours. As we look on the tray, we'll notice first of all this rimmed baking sheet has a cooling rack on it, and the reason for that is we want the air to circulate around the meat when it's cooking. When we're talking about temperature, I remember I said we're going to bake this and then sear it. A little bit different. Normally we used to a high heat. With this we're going low and slow, 250 Fahrenheit. We want to cook these gently so they don't get too dry. That gentle cooking will give us a juicy pork chop. We're going to let this cook for 30 to 45 minutes, but we're going to let a thermometer be our guide. So after about 20 to 30 minutes, just check the internal temperature. The goal we're looking for is 120 Fahrenheit because we're going to finishing the cooking process off on the stove top. Whilst the pork is gently cooking in that oven, we're going to make a peach pan sauce. I've always felt peaches and pork get along so well, and this sauce makes a few cups full so you can use it on sandwiches. It's a great pan sauce to learn. So I'm going to turn on this stove. To the peaches, I'm going to add some light brown sugar. This is going to give it sweetness. We're going to be adding some mustard, and this is a whole grain mustard, a couple of tablespoons. Mustard and pork go along so well. Some rice wine vinegar, that's going to give it a nice little bit of tartiness to it. And a couple of sprigs of fresh thyme, that's going to release its floral flavor as it's cooking. And then finally, I'm going to add some dry white wine, a couple of cups of white wine. What we want to do is bring this up to a boil. Once it comes up to a boil, we're just going to give it a little stir around and let this reduce. This is going to take about 20 to 30 minutes. It's going to thicken up and the flavors will meld together. And that's how easy it is to make a quick sauce. The sauce has been reducing for about 20 minutes, and as you look in the pan, it's made this beautiful glaze and the peaches are coated beautifully. At this stage, what we want to do is fish out those pieces of thyme. So we're just taking those out. Now that we've got our peaches ready, we can remove these from the pan and place them into a bowl. So what I'm going to do now is place this to one side where the pork chops are still cooking, and then I'm going to wash out the pan ready to sear the pork chops, but this smells delightful. After they've been in the oven and they've reached about 120 Fahrenheit, we're going to sear them to get that Maillard reaction on the outside, but you can first of all, you can see just how they're pretty pale at the moment. I'm going to turn the pan on, get it nice and warm, and we're going to add some oil to the pan. And you just want to use a neutral oil for this. Just get the pan nice and hot. And this is a really quick sear. They're 3/4 of the way cooked now. So now we're just looking to get a brown on all of the sides. And if you look down, when you're looking to see if the pan's hot, at the oil, it should be sort of dancing. So what I want to do is make sure the meat's dry. Just taking a piece of paper towel and taking off any excess moisture that may be in there, placing it down and just letting it sear. And this is going to sear on this side for about 30 to 45 seconds, just to get a good bit of colour on this. After about 30 to 45 seconds, we're just going to turn it onto its side. We're just looking to get some colour on its side, and then we're going to go onto the other side. And you can see as you look at the chop, it's got this lovely colour forming now. That Maillard reaction, which is the proteins and the sugars caramelising, which gives it a really savoury taste. Just look at that. It's absolutely stunning, isn't it? We're going to let this rest for about 10 minutes. Whilst the pork's resting, we're going to deglaze the pan with the peach sauce to get any extra flavour from the bottom of that pan. There's lots of fond built up, which is the brown bits on the bottom of the pan, and we're just going to deglaze that with this sauce. After it's rested for about 10 minutes, it's the perfect time to slice it. So I'm just going to come across and see, and just look. You can see by the sheen on the meat just how beautiful it is. As I slice it, it's like butter. It's just coming through the meat, and it's beautiful. Just look at that meat. This served with that peach sauce is going to be absolutely delightful.